Hi. So welcome to day 18. Only two more after this. We're so close. Today is entitled Revenge and Reconciliation. So Joseph, who we've followed this whole time, he gets revenge on his brothers a little bit. I mean, he's not very, very mean, but he certainly does put them through the ringer a little bit. And then they're reconciled, which is actually, it's a really beautiful story that it all comes full circle, and that actually that family is repaired and restored, and I think for us might have implications about the way we think of our own lives and relationships. But that's after the reading. We're going to read it's chapters 44 and 45 in Genesis, and I'm going to read from the Voice translation again. So get ready to hear the story of Joseph. Genesis 44. After the meal was over, Joseph commanded the steward of his house, "Fill the men's sacks with food, as much as they can carry. Put each man's money back on top of his sack. And one more thing. I want you to put my personal cup, my silver cup, into the top of the sack of the youngest, along with his money for the grain." The steward did everything that Joseph told him to do. The next morning, as soon as it was light, the men were sent off with their donkeys toward home. But when they had gone only a short distance from the city, Joseph spoke to his steward. "Go now, follow them. When you catch up to them, say to them, 'Why have you repaid kindness with evil? My master's silver cup is missing, and you have it. Isn't this the cup from which he drinks? Doesn't he use it for divination, to discover secrets hidden from most men? You have committed evil in doing this.' So the steward went after them, and when he caught up to them, he repeated the words Joseph told him to say. 'Why would my lord accuse us of something like this? We are your servants. We would never do such a thing. Remember the money that we found at the top of our sacks after our first trip? We brought it back to you from the land of Canaan. Why would we still steal silver or gold from your lord's house this time? If you find his cup with any of us, let that man be put to death, and the rest of us will become my lord's servants.' And the steward replied, 'Let it be as you say, but I'll be more lenient. Whoever is found to possess the cup will become my servant, and the rest of you will be considered innocent and may go free.' Then they all moved quickly, retrieved sacks, lowered them to the ground, and opened them so that the steward could see what was inside them. He searched each sack, beginning with the eldest son and ending with the youngest. At last, the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. When the brothers saw this, they tore their clothes in anguish. They knew what had to happen. They had no choice but to load their donkeys and return to the city. Judah and his brothers all came to Joseph's house while he was still there, and they fell to the ground in front of him. "What have you done? Don't you know that someone in my position practices divination and can discover secrets hidden from most men?" And Judah said to Joseph, speaking for all his brothers, "What can we possibly say to you, my lord? How can we explain this? How can we clear ourselves of this mistake? God has found your servants to be guilty. Here we are then, slaves to you, my lord, all of us, and also the one in possession of the cup has been found." Joseph said to Judah, "Far be it from me that I should do something like that. Only the one in possession of the cup will be my slave. As for the rest of you, go in peace to your father." But Judah stepped up to Joseph and begged him for mercy. Oh, my Lord, let your servant please speak a private word to you. Please don't be angry with me, for you, just like Pharaoh himself. You asked us if we had a father or a brother. And we told you, yes, we have a father, an old man, and a young brother, the child of his old age. His brother is dead, so he alone is left of his mother's children. And his father loves him dearly. Then you told us to bring the boy down to you, so that you could see him. At first we said to you, this boy cannot leave his father, because his father would die without him. But you told us that unless he came with us, you wouldn't agree to see us again. When we went back to your servant, our father, we told him what you had said, my lord. And when our father asked us to go again to buy more food, we told him, we can't go without our youngest brother, or we won't be able to get in to see him. So our youngest brother came with us. Then your servant, my father, responded, you know that my wife Rachel bore me 2 sons. One went off and never came back. And I know he was without a doubt torn to pieces. I haven't seen him since he left. But now, if you take my youngest also from me, and any harm should come to him, the sorrow would kill me. I can't allow you to condemn this old grey head to the grave. So now, if I go back to your servant my father without the boy, he will die, because of his life depends completely upon the welfare of this boy. As soon as he sees that Benjamin is not with us, the sorrow will kill him, and we, your servants, will condemn an old grey head, the grey head of our father, your servant, to the grave. I gave my father my word that I would take care of the boy and return him safely home. I told him, if I don't bring him back to you in one piece, that I am perfectly willing to bear the blame forever. So please, let me, your servant, remain as your slave in the place of the boy, and let him go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father without the boy? I couldn't stand to see the terrible suffering that this would put him through. Genesis 45. Then Joseph could no longer keep his composure. The room was crowded with people, so he ordered his attendants, "Send everyone out of the room." Joseph didn't want anyone else in the room when he finally told his brothers his true identity. But he began to cry so loudly that the Egyptians heard it, and the Pharaoh's household heard it too. Joseph turned and addressed his brothers. "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But his brothers were too shocked to speak. They couldn't answer, for they were so overwhelmed that they were standing in Joseph's presence. Joseph said to his brothers, "Come closer to me." His brothers approached him cautiously. "I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. Don't be upset or angry with yourselves any longer because of what you did. You see, God sent me here ahead of you to preserve life. For famine struck this land 2 years ago, and there are 5 more years in which there will be no ploughing or harvesting. God sent me here ahead of you to make sure that you and your families survive this terrible ordeal and have a remnant left on earth. So it wasn't really you that sent me here, but God, the same God who made me an advisor to Pharaoh, master of his household, and ruler over everyone in the land of Egypt. Hurry now, go to my father and relay this message. Here is what your son Joseph says. God has made me master over all Egypt. Come to me and don't delay. I'll arrange for all of you to settle in the land of Goshen, where you can be near me. You and all your children and grandchildren, as well as your flocks and herds and everything that you have. I will provide for you here. Since 5 more years of famine are still to come, I will make sure your household and everything you have will not descend into poverty. Now, you see with your own eyes, and even my brother Benjamin sees that it is really I who speak to you without an interpreter. You must tell my father how honoured I am here in Egypt. Tell him everything you have seen. Hurry, bring my father here. With that, he fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck. They embraced and they both wept. Then he kissed all of his brothers one by one, cried on their shoulders as well, and after that they talked for a time together. The news spread to Pharaoh's house that Joseph's brothers had come. When Pharaoh and his other advisors heard, they were pleased. Pharaoh told Joseph, "Tell your brothers, do this. Load your animals and go back to the land called Canaan. Get your father and your families. Come here to me, and I will give you the prime properties of Egypt. You will enjoy the very best Egypt has to offer." Now, Joseph, I command you to tell them also, do this. Take wagons from the land of Egypt so that your little children, your wives, and your father can make the journey. Come quickly. Don't worry about bringing all your things, for once you get here, the best of Egypt will be spread out at your feet. The sons of Israel did exactly as Pharaoh ordered. Joseph followed Pharaoh's directive and made sure they had enough wagons. He gave them food and other supplies for their journey, including an extra change of clothes. But to Benjamin, he gave about 7.5 pounds of silver and 5 sets of clothes. To his father he sent even more, 10 donkeys loaded with the best Egyptian gifts and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread and provisions for his father for the journey. Then he sent the brothers on their way. As they were leaving, he gave them one last piece of advice. Don't argue along the way. The brothers travelled east out of Egypt and eventually turned north to return to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They couldn't wait to tell him the good news. "Father, Joseph is still alive. But more than that, he is ruler over the land of Egypt." Their father was stunned. He couldn't believe his ears. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to carry him to Egypt, his spirits soared, and he resolved to make the trip. "I have seen enough," he said. "My son Joseph is alive, and I must go to see him before I die." So there we have it, sort of the main part of the conclusion to this story of being sold into slavery and all that misery that Joseph endures, and finally he's kind of come full circle. And I called the day today revenge and reconciliation. Does he get revenge? Joseph seems to want to trick his brothers, maybe to see if they've changed. I'm sure that's the point, really. That Benjamin becomes in the fire line because Benjamin, they could feel the same way to Benjamin that they felt towards him, because Benjamin has now been the inheritor of Jacob's love. And instead of being willing to get rid of him and being happy to get rid of him, Judah steps up and says, "Look, I cannot let you have him. You will have to take me in his stead." So Judah has learned. Reuben, in the chapters from yesterday, he also was willing to do the right thing. And so we see that the brothers have have grown just as Joseph has grown. And it's actually a very touching scene when, you know, Joseph just keeps bursting into tears, which is a lovely thought, that he just is so happy rather than resentful. Because, I mean, a lot of years have passed. What, 13 years? He's 13 in this part, and he was 17 when he was sold into slavery. So 13 years have gone by. 13 years is quite an awful lot of time, especially when most of it was in jail, to get very angry at your brothers who've put you there. But that's not how he responds. He is so happy to be able to bring them out of the situation that they find themselves in. And that does lead me to quite an important point, that when he was sold into slavery, he's saying, oh God, God sent me ahead so that I could make a way for you. Now, I don't really, I would make the distinction that I don't think God would have relied on the brothers selling him into slavery. If God needs Joseph to get there, and he would have made a way, he'd have sent him there. So God works good, doesn't he? God works wonderful things out of what was meant to be negative. God redeems the situation, and we hear that in Romans, that God works all things for the good of those who love him, and that's what I would take from this, which again is just a really wonderful promise in our lives. There are things that people have done to us, that we have been inflicted upon us, that actually sometimes we almost think, well, that discounts me from things in life, that separates me. But actually, the very awful thing that happened to Joseph, right, when he was 17, that awful event, actually God turned around and made it the vehicle for the salvation of the entirety of the line. That is an amazing promise, and it's one that's available to us all. So, you know, plenty to think about, and we are so close now to the end of Genesis. So I hope that you are feeling proud of your achievements, and your eyes set on the goal ahead, and have learned and are still learning